No, seriously.
I could get it on my phone.
Right on it. She's got it. I don't have charts.
Charles, it's okay. I got it.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, the hour of 10 o'clock having arrived, I'd like to call the meeting to order. Now, clerk will call, what we're going to do first is we're going to organize. We have some work to do today. We're going to organize whether this is a continuation, convening of the Wednesday Executive Committee meeting, or the legally and timely posted meeting for the Executive Committee meeting for Friday. But we'll go around the room and organize ourselves as soon as we take care of like roll call and things like that. So clerk will call the roll.
Allen? Braz?
Here.
Hanson? O'Shea?
Here.
Iqbal?
Iqbal present.
Kenyon?
Here.
Lewis?
Lewis here.
Martin?
Here.
Sanchez?
Here.
Sheffalo? Surges?
Here.
Thomas?
Here.
Weber?
Weber present.
Wonicky?
Yeah.
You have a quorum?
Wonicky present.
And Wegman present.
Shefflo present.
Chance present.
Kai is present.
Okay, so we have a quorum. I would like to ask the lovely Janice Hill to come forward and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Justice for all.
Thank you, Janice. Okay, at this point, my intention would be to, as far as the work that we do today, my intention would be to finish the finance and transportation resolutions, moving those to the consent agenda, and then either go to the presentations on the agenda for the Friday meeting, or to continue on with the Wednesday meeting as far as committee reports. So, and my intention today is to move a lot of things, the routine things onto the consent agenda, the non-routine things move onto the agenda, non-consent agenda for the board meeting, to maximize options and resolutions, to give the board as much leeway and flexibility that they would desire as they go through, especially the coronavirus funding material. So with that, let me get some guidance. Would it be, would it be all right if, and let's get, we need to have these, this is staging. Executive committee meeting is staging for the board meeting on Tuesday. There's a Monday working meeting for the CAC group. And so, how would you like to have that staged? But once we agree to the approach that we're going to take, I'd like us to stick with it. So any thoughts about where you'd like to. Yes, Mr. Hoshait, would you rise?
Mr. Chairman, I think we should finish out the agenda first. That should be pretty brief, and then we can flow right through.
Okay, and then would we go to the agenda for today's posted meeting? Will there be any objections to going to the posted agenda?
I have no objection to that.
No objections?
No.
Okay, all right. Then that's what we'll do. Is that the consensus of the meeting? Mr. Sanchez?
Does the state's
Right.
attorney, oh yeah, does the state's attorney have anything to weigh in? Otherwise, I'm good with that.
Well, my guess is that Mr. Hoshait and Mr. McMahon have been in touch. So, Mr. McMahon.
So that procedure's fine. You can go through the agenda from the Wednesday meeting and then move into the agenda that was posted for this morning's meeting.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, thank you, John. And along those lines, let me go to, next on the agenda is John Hoshait for Finance and Budget. I believe you have 13 items.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I move all 13 items.
So moved by Mr. Hoshait, second by Mr. Leonard. Mr. Hoshait.
Yes, most of these are routine. Number one is a budget adjustment for the bonds we just sold for the multipurpose facility. Two is authorizing a lease for sheriff's in-car cameras. Three authorizes a contract for Cisco hardware, software, and IT services. Number four is a renewal of our intergovernmental agreement with the Child Advocacy Center and the University of Illinois. Item five is a contract for HVAC improvements at the Government Center, Building C. Item six is sex offender treatment services agreement. Seven is DocuSign software purchase. Eight is renewal of a food provider contract at the JJC. Nine is an an agreement for strategic communications and immunization coverage from a grant program. 10 is authorizing filing a request for Rebuild Illinois funds for farmland protection. 11 is authorizing applications and accepting fundings from state and federal agencies under the CARES Act. 12 is approving the purchase of the coronavirus relief fund care packages. And 13 is the monthly payment of our bills.
Okay, is there any discussion? From people present? Any from people on the phone? None?
Excuse me,
Uh,
Mr. Chairman.
Oh, yes, Ms. Thomas?
I'd like to-
Would you rise, please?
I would like to remove item 12 from the consent agenda.
Okay, let's see, number 12. Okay, let's see.
That's fine.
Okay, so, okay, yes, okay. So you could either do that on Tuesday morning or now, and so I'll remove it from the consent agenda for Tuesday, when we put together Tuesday's agenda that we'll post later on today, okay? Any others? Okay, seeing, hearing none. Clerk, call the roll.
Franz,
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
Hoshait,
Yes.
Iqbal,
Iqbal, yes.
Kenyon. Leonard,
Yes.
Lewis,
yes,
Martin,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Shefflo,
Shefflo, yes.
Sturgis,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
Weber,
Weber, yes.
Monicky,
Wonicky, yes,
and Allen. Passes.
Okay, the motion passes. Those will be added, the 12 items will be added to the consent agenda. And the number 12 or the 13th item will be a non-consent agenda. Okay, next, Mr. Franz for transportation.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I have 10 items. I'll move all 10.
Okay, so let's see, on my list, and I might, yes, I see, okay. So Mr. Fraz moves, seconded by Mr. Kenyon. Mr. Fraz.
Item number 1 approves an agreement with Kimberly, or I'm sorry, Kimley Horn and Associates out of Warrenville, and this is to update and review the road improvement impact fee ordinance. The contract is for $255,064. Item 2 is to update an IGA with the state of Illinois. This is Long Meadow Parkway, section C2. This is for phase 3 construction engineering. And this provides and allows for us to insert some additional funds that became available. Items 3 and 4 are approval of 2 road district paving projects, one for Blackberry and one for Caneville Townships as requested by their highway departments. Item 5 approves a supplemental appropriation for the Randall Road Bridge reconstruction project. This was due to the underlying structure was found to be in worse condition than it's expected, in the amount of $18,498. Item 6 approves an agreement with Huff and Huff out of Oak Brook for on-call engineering services, not to exceed $150,000. Item 7 approves phases 1 and 2 engineering services agreement with Kimley Horn out of Warrenville again. This is for the Plank Road and the Montgomery Road safety improvement projects in the amount of $533. Excuse me, $580,133. Item 8 approves relocation funds, Long Meadow Parkway, section C2 again. This is for the relocation off of Bowles Road of the Fernandez Pallet Company in the amount of $131,110. And items 9 and 10 are the approve the acquisition of right-of-way. This is for the Dauberman Road extension down by Big Rock, totaling 20 acres. The 2 parcels combined are a cost of $508,200. That is all I have.
Okay, is any discussion? Seeing none from people in the room, is there any from anybody on the phone? Hearing none, clerk call the roll.
Frost,
Yes.
Hanson,
Hanson, yes.
Roscheit,
Yes.
Iqbal, Kenyon,
McKinnon, yes.
Leonard,
Yes.
Lewis,
Lewis, yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Shefflo,
Shefflo, yes.
Surges,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
Weber,
Weber, yes.
Monicky,
Wonicky, yes.
and Iqbal. Okay, motion passes.
Okay, the motion passes. Okay, at this point for the folks, scoring this at home, we'd flow into the executive committee agenda for Friday, July 10th. I'll go to public comment and then we'll go into the various resolutions and discussion on that agenda. Is that the consensus of the group, the executive committee? Okay, seeing that it is, we'll move forward. Any public comment on any of today's meeting? Seeing none in the audience, any from anybody on the phone? Hearing none, we'll go then to the, and these resolutions will not go to consent agenda, and I'll call all of them. So everybody will have a chance to discuss and move forward to a non-consent agenda so that, again, maximum options. So my intention is we'll go in the order of task force resolution, the CAC vehicle resolution. That would be like a box car, like a vehicle where amendments can be placed in like cargo at the Tuesday meeting after the Monday work together. Maximum flexibility and whatever members of the CAP committee would like for their flexibility and for productive work. Certainly, we all support that. Then we'll have presentation of public health. And I would suggest to remember that this is why the money has come from the federal government. I gave Barb Jeffers a copy of Pale Rider. If you ever want to read something about the Spanish influenza, that it's really hard to even get through the thing, that's the book for you. Then there will be the presentation and discussion and vote on moving necessary, inclusive, equitable access to high-speed internet IT infrastructure for the courts and underserved areas, for work from home, for all breadwinner employees, distance learning for all students, not just those in high-income areas, and then telemedicine for all families, so they don't have to go into the disease treatment areas. Then there will be presentation, discussion, vote on federal HIPAA law compliance communication system. Now that every sheriff's deputy and law enforcement call to a home and business could be a COVID public health call. There will be a county clerk for safe, hygienic elections. And then across the board treasury regulations. This will come after Monday's presentation onto Tuesday. This would be the Joe Onsick list that I believe that was asked for reimbursement of COVID-related expenses. I would anticipate putting that on the agenda so that it can be included. So I think that this morning should be informational and then a love fest of yes votes. Again, generating maximum options for the full board to consider on Tuesday. And then let's see, what the board's pleasure is. That's it for that. First one is may I have a motion and a second to discuss potentially pass resolution on coronavirus release task force proposal and dissolving the coronavirus relief fund task force. So moved by Mr. Leonard, second by Mr. Surgis. Any discussion? Hearing none. Oh, Mr. Sanchez?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It would seem that this resolution is a bit obsolete. The task force itself has already been dissolved by the County Board of Action, and the proposal has been the starting point for the new committee. So I don't know what that would look like. If we accept the proposal, does that mean we have to use the money in the way that is suggested by the proposal?
No, it's certainly not binding. It's like you say, it's a starting point. We move it to the board, and the board can decide to ignore it, as you say. And I don't mean in a pejorative way, just that if you feel that it's moot, that's fine. So, Mr. Hoscheit.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I support moving this forward to the full board for consideration, knowing that we can certainly amend it if we choose to do so.
Okay. Any other discussion? Ms. Allen?
Yes, forgive me for coming in, and if I've missed something, I don't mean to make things go longer, but the committee is not actually dissolved until we pass the resolution dissolving it. Am I not correct?
No, that's a point of contention that doesn't make any difference, frankly. I mean, the work is over, it's gone. I think that's one thing that the CAC group and the task force, I think all of us agree on, is that, it's dissolved, they have the work product, and as John says, the board can do whatever it would like. So that one is I would say that we move forward. So Any thoughts from people on the phone? Seeing none or hearing none, clerk call the roll.
Allen,
Just to clarify, this is to move this resolution forward. Am I
Yes.
correct? Aye.
Frost,
Yes.
Hanson, O'Shea,
Hanson, yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
Iqbal, Kenyon, Leonard,
Yes.
Lewis,
Lewis, yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Shefflo,
Sheffo, yes.
Surges,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
Weber,
Weber, yes.
Wonicky,
Wonicky, yes.
and Iqbal.
Dr. Iqbal, are you with us? Okay, hearing none, the motion passes. Next up, on the agenda, I have us going to public health, but I'd be happy to go next to any action as a holder for the CAC, where you'd have basically a spot holder where you could call it for the board on Tuesday. So anything that you would either like to present or move, even as a vehicle, so that you have that availability, I would call for that now.
So moved.
So moved by Mr. Sanchez, seconded by Mr. Hoshait. Is that a
Yes,
second?
I second. I just,
Come on.
purpose of clarification, are you referring to item number 6?
Yes, yes, all right, yes.
Thank you.
And that becomes whatever you would like it to become after the work on Monday.
I'm so sorry.
Okay, Mr. Surges, would you rise, please?
Absolutely. I'm getting lost between which agendas.
I'm sorry, that's my
following.
fault. It's
I'm-
my
I'm-
fault.
Between trying to grab it online and I'm just, help me for a minute.
But symbolically, there are some people who will want me to give a higher priority. And I'm going in a type of chronological order and then priority order because of the importance of the CAC work that's being done. I wanted to move it up. I had put it sixth after a number of these, but out of respect for the work that's being done, I'm just moving it up. And Mr. Hoshait is pointing out that rather than going directly to public health resolution, I'm going to, number one, demonstrate respect by just moving it in the order. Sometimes symbolic matters. So where we are is on the July 10th Special Executive Committee agenda. It's item number 5 under the preliminary board agenda for July 14th. It's item number 6.
Gotcha. I'm sorry. I was still following the
Fault.
the 8th.
My fault.
My bad.
So any further discussion? Okay, seeing none. Any from anyone on the phone? Hearing none.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes. Who is this?
Yeah, this is Mo Iqbal.
Okay, Dr. Iqbal.
Yes, I was interrupted. I think it's the Zoom is going in and out, and the mute and unmute takes a while. So if you could kindly repeat what is going on at this point. It's a resolution, which is, you said item number 6 is going to the board.
Good.
Is that the?
I'd be happy to. This is on the July 10th, 2020 Executive Committee agenda. It is number 6 under CRF Task Force. Resolution regarding CAC results and recommendation. And the intention is to give maximum flexibility to the folks on the CAC committee and then also to all board members. So based on work that's been done already, and then that's going to be done on Monday, that they would have a vehicle, something similar to like a boxcar on a track for movement where they can put in cargo and we can discuss and vote on it as a board on Tuesday. Does that explain it?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Doctor. Okay, any other comment from the phone, folks who are on the phone? Hearing none, clerk call the roll.
Allen,
Aye.
Ross,
Yes.
Hanson,
Hanson, yes.
Boscheit,
Yes.
Iqbal,
Iqbal, yes.
Kenyon, Leonard,
Yes.
Lewis,
Lewis, yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Sanchez, Shefflo,
Shefflo, yes.
Surges,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
Weber,
Weber, yes.
Wonicky.
Wonicky, yes.
Passes.
Okay, the motion passes. Next, we'll go back to the numbered order. So number 2, may I have a motion and a second to discuss and potentially pass to the non-consent agenda, resolution approving public health contact tracing and other essential functions proposal. So moved by Mr. Sanchez, second by Mr. Leonard. Ms. Barbara Jeffers, would you come forward to present? Oh, yes, thank you. The recording secretary is going to distribute for your consideration all weekend and up until Tuesday, a draft of the resolution that Ms. Jeffers and her staff are putting forward. And my first reading on it, it's very good. Covers a lot of ground, a lot of important work, and it really is true that all of this exercise and all of the funding, it's because this is a public health emergency, and we are so fortunate to have someone of Barb Jeffers' strength and competence to lead us through this. So, Ms. Jeffers.
Thank you. Good morning. The resolution, I'd like to read the resolution again, give some context to it. Whereas in late 2019, a novel severe acute respiratory illness emerged in our country, which has been referred to as COVID-19, which has the potential of rapid spread and loss of life. And whereas on March 9th, the governor of Illinois issued a statewide disaster proclamation, which provided an executive order in response to COVID-19 for the state of Illinois. And whereas on March 13th, the President of the United States declared the COVID-19 outbreak a national disaster. And whereas on March 24th, Kane County Board declared a public health emergency for COVID-19 response, which provided the executive director of Kane County Health Department the authority to enter into contracts and incur obligations on behalf of the county, which are necessary to effectively combat the public health emergency and to protect the health and safety of our residents. Whereas the health department has been directed by the Illinois Department of Public Health to reduce the spread of the COVID-19 virus within Kane County by providing mitigation in the forms of personal protection equipment, education and training, as well as case investigation, contact tracing, and resource coordination. And whereas contact tracing and investigations are significant actions that reduce the spread of the virus, reducing the number of lives lost, reducing the strain on the healthcare system, and reducing the negative impact. Whereas the Illinois Department of Public Health recommends 30 contact tracers per 100,000 persons within KCHD, which the health department does not have capacity. So for our community, that would be 160 tracers. Whereas given the complexity, timeline requirements to coordinate, build, activate, and operationalize a contact tracing program, the health department must outsource the contact tracing project. And whereas the U.S. Department of Treasury has provided funding through the CARES Act, which provides for public health services and activities that are substantially dedicated to mitigating, containing, and controlling the COVID-19 public health emergency through December 2020. Whereas the Health Department is requesting $12,009,000 of the CARES Act funding to be allocated to mitigate and contain the COVID-19 public health emergency. Whereas the funding to be allocated are for the following expenses: salaries and benefits of employees, as well as contracting out with other needed positions. The contractual service of contact tracing within the 12.9 is 5.6. According to the Illinois Department of Public Health, we must continue with contact tracing through June of 2021. Therefore, we will be using additional funding from the Illinois Department of Public Health beginning January. We have to do training and education and mileage expenses. Our commodities equal, we are required to have a 30-day emergency stockpile for our community in anticipation of a surge, in addition to the continuous distribution of PPEs. We are required to continue with doing mitigation in the community, reducing the spread through the homeless shelters. We are required to make sure those who don't have the capacity to have housing to be housed so they don't spread the disease. One of the most important things that we do for the contact tracing is the economic impact. If we don't reduce the spread, what it will do is put a huge burden on our hospitals. What our hospitals are experiencing today is that when COVID is a surge in their hospital, they can't treat anything else. And the reduction of the workforce and the number of healthcare services that's provided is significantly impacted. So it's really important that we reduce the number of persons who have COVID.
Ms. Jeffers, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we are getting some feedback. I'm not sure if that's from the podium mic or if there are mics that are put together closely. So if you adjust yours.
Is that better?
Yes, beautiful. Thank you, Mark. And thank you, Ms. Jeffers.
In addition to our operating supplies, we also have communication that we have to continue with. We work with our long-term care facilities, our schools, as well as our healthcare. As I stated earlier, the Illinois Department of Public Health has required our health departments, not just Kane County, all the health departments to engage in contact tracing and case investigation to contain and reduce the spread of the COVID-19 virus. We are required to contact all positive cases within 24 hours. Yesterday, we got 1,000 positive cases with 66 plus people. There is no way possible to contact 1,000 people plus the people that go on from there. With our current workforce, every single one of us would not be able to manage that. The ability to do this lies in the authority of the CARES Act funding so that we can engage with an outside vendor, as I stated earlier, to assist us in this monumental task. Each day we delay is another day that our community is at risk for the spread of the virus. I ask that you approve the allocation so we can begin the process of protecting our community. I will provide each one of you a summary of contact tracing as well as breakdown of our expenses for your review for Monday. And I thank you for this opportunity to be able to share this with you. Are there any questions?
Okay, thank you, Barb. Is there any discussion? Mr. Sanchez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is for contact tracing and containment and mitigation. So there's going to be other costs incurred from the health department. Okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I assume that. I just wanted
Yes, our community, our homeless, our long-term care facilities, our PPEs. we provide PPEs for our first responders, our hospitals, our long-term care, those entities. We don't provide PPEs for individuals, but just our larger bodies that have to engage in the healthcare response to this virus, like hospitals and fire and police.
And this will help take some of the load off of the work you guys are doing, I'm assuming, as well?
The contact tracing will significantly take the load. Well, it will make us respond faster because we are behind.
Oh, and one more question. In your opinion, is it better to reduce the amount of testing we're doing if we're doing
No,
contact tracing?
My opinion is to increase the number of tests.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, other discussion, Mr. Fraz?
Yeah, Ms. Jeffers, this would come to the full county board then on Tuesday, correct?
Yes.
So if we were to table items 2 through 5 and let the committee discuss them on Monday, items 2 through 5 have nothing included as far as details for us to review. And I would like to see the opportunity. I don't want to hobble that committee with something that's passed today without any detail. I would like that committee to be able to review those items 2 through 5 on Monday. And I would make a motion to table those 4 items.
Okay, let's see. So you've made a motion. We did get squared away at the very beginning for this exact purpose, that we were going to go through all of the items. And so to go back on that procedural word given, I believe would be inappropriate, but I understand that that is the will of, I mean, it's up to the executive committee to do whatever you would like. Nothing is final action here. It's just putting it into a proper place. If it's not passed today, CAC committee is not the same thing as the executive committee. You can bypass it, you can ignore it, you can act on it. You want to have these pieces in place. So I did ask for the everyone on the committee's word that we would be given the opportunity to discuss and vote on it, to put it in position to have at least the same priority that our local government partners have, that we would put our Kane County taxpayer duties in that same kind of position. So, but it's your prerogative to make a motion to table, and
I'll
is there a
second the motion.
So Mr. Hoshite seconds that motion. No discussion. Clerk will call the roll.
Allen,
No.
Ross, Hanson,
Hanson, yes.
Hoshite,
Yes.
Iqbal,
Iqbal, no.
Kenyon, Leonard,
No.
Lewis,
No.
Martin,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Shefflo,
Shefflo, no.
Surges,
No.
Thomas,
Yes.
Weber,
Weber, no.
Wonicky,
Warnicki, no.
motion fails.
Sorry. Okay, the motion fails. I believe that it was 6-8. Is that correct? We would have, I think, maybe 14. Okay, so 6-8. Okay, motion fails. Further discussion. Ms. Allen. Ms. Allen, and then
Yes.
someone on the phone.
The reason I wanted to vote no on tabling is that with all respect to the Monday meeting, I think the more information that we have, that we can look over the weekend to try and, Barb's department went to the trouble to break down these numbers. I think there are going to be presentations from various others of our departments and offices. I would just like to gather more information and then bring that to Monday's meeting as well, with respect.
Okay, other comments, discussion? Mr. Hushait?
I think we're almost unanimously on the same page that we want to get this money out to where the appropriate entities are. The purpose for my vote to table this is because although I appreciate the detail that's in this memo, Ms. Jeffers has also indicated there's support behind this that typically, if we vetted this through the normal committee process, would be presented. There's three other items on the agenda. Let me back up. I didn't see this resolution before it was just handed to me. And it appears that there are three other resolutions that are going to be handed to us the same way. The consensus of the committee that was set up to evaluate these items was to agree with the 55-45 split, with 55% of the funds being available for county use. And in my opinion, there's clearly enough money to do that. So we're not, if we move forward with a consensus to allocate 45% to other government applicants to the program, we're not ignoring the county's request. In fact, that'll be a top priority. So I just want to keep that in perspective as we do that. I have no objection to hearing and receiving these documents. It would have been nice if we received them before today. But certainly the committee and I as one vote on this will look at all the detail and have questions and expect to vet that through a process. I would say that in terms of urgency, out of the requests that are on here on the list, the health department probably has the most urgent request given the contact tracing issue, and we can consider that as well. So I just wanted to clarify it. We're not trying to, or I'm not trying to obstruct anything. I just want to make sure it gets vetted properly so that when we bring it to a vote, we can have near unanimous consent. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hushait. Mr. Fraz?
Similar comments to Mr. Hoshite. You're known for doing detailed preparation. I think everybody respects that of you. When I'm handed something seconds before I'm supposed to vote on it, it's not a good thing. We're minutes away from voting on number 3. I have nothing on my desk. I have nothing to prepare. I have no background. Just doesn't seem like the right way to do it. What's the reason that we were not provided this information prior to the meeting?
Okay. This is not final action. This is putting pieces of basically legislation in position so that it can be considered. If we're going to place in a position funding for our external partners, the local governments, it seems to me that we also ought to have in position our higher priority, even higher priority, and that's a very high priority, these other things. This is not final action. We're having the discussion today. I encourage the discussion on Monday on what you've had. So this is not like you're being asked to make a vote on a final action. It's a vote to take this home over the weekend, study it, then address it on Monday, if you wish, as the leadership of the CAC committee, and then have it in position at least on the same priority on Tuesday as I think the move forward on local government funding. So the idea that, well, this is last minute, this is not final action, and you're being given a whole weekend, an entire meeting, and then a Tuesday meeting. So this is to place in position what you need to do to give this the same kind of urgency that will be given to the local government funding.
That really doesn't answer my question. My question is the information sitting right over there, it's not available to me. I don't think it was written up today. Why isn't it part of the package? Why wasn't it part of our agenda package? Why aren't we being given information to prepare for a meeting so that we can walk in here and make a good decision?
Thank you. You're I understand the point that you're making. And my response was, that did respond that this is not final action. That's a red herring kind of argument in my mind, that you have now time over the weekend and on Monday discussion and Tuesday discussion. And so you have it in hand now, and this is just to move it in place.
So
It's-
you're telling me
it's as-
I have time over the weekend to study something that I'm voting on in a few minutes?
Here, let's put the shoe on the other foot. On Tuesday, you will be bringing something to the board, the CAC proposal. Isn't that correct? Yes. You're going to be bringing a proposal to the ultimate, to make a decision on Tuesday that people will have talked about and made decisions, I'm assuming, on Monday. We have more information from public health today, Saturday, and Sunday than you will be using in your own committee to give to board members on Tuesday.
Well, today is the executive committee. I'm being asked to vote on several items here I have no information on, had no information on before the meeting, last night when I usually do my preparation, and it's given out one at a time just before the vote. That's not the way to do things. It's not the way we've done them in the past, and it's not a very open, Deb, you're shaking your hand, you're welcome, you're shaking your head, you're welcome to comment, but
I
this
understand
isn't the
point.
right way to do things.
Do you know,
And
again,
as a board member, I object
okay,
to being given information seconds before the vote.
good. Remember what you're saying today. Remember what you're saying today on Monday and Tuesday when people have more than 48, probably, what is that, 72 hours of notice that you're given now versus what you will deliver to the board. So be careful in the type of criticism because you're just applying it to yourself
This
later.
isn't, Mr. Chairman, we were just given the information on the public health, just given to us.
Okay, what is
You mean this was written up this morning? It just became available seconds ago? Why couldn't it have been included in the agenda package?
Okay. To answer that question, let me ask you where we advanced the CAC proposal this morning into position. Where's the CAC information? I mean, and I don't object. I think that it's fair to put things into position so that the board as a whole can act on it. Again, you have more information today than the CAC is bringing forward, and let's say out of necessity. So your objection is recorded, understood. So thank you so much. Ms. Thomas, then Ms. Allen. Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry. I had Ms. Lewis had raised her hand on the phone. Ms. Lewis?
Yes, yes. Thank you, Chairman. I have been relatively quiet on all of this, trying to gather and listen to all of this because it's quite a task. And first of all, I want to thank the original task force, Terry Hunden, and that group for putting in all the hard work they did so that we had the best information. And then now passing it on to the CAC team and the amount of work that my fellow board members are putting in. I'm in awe of the fact that you guys are doing all this. It's overwhelming. So thank all of you for doing all this. And as far as what we're talking about right at the moment, my feelings on that is last week we listened to Metro West. We listened to the mayors, present their cases for their funding. We listened to the fire protection districts and some of our nonprofits. And so now today we are actually listening to our county people. We're listening to Barb Jeffers. We're going to be talking about public safety and the clerk's expenses. And so I am more than happy to give our own county employees time to bring these forward and for us to be able to hear this. And then since we are going to be getting copies of this over the weekend and even probably into Monday morning, we will have time for the people that are working on this Monday to actually delve into it a little deeper. So I just want to thank you all.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Lewis. Mr. Hanson was next. Then it'll be to Ms. Allen, then Ms. Thomas, then Mr. Shefflow. So Mr. Hanson.
Morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to echo the sentiments of Commissioner Fraz and Commissioner Lewis, thank you for everything that people have done so far. I believe getting this information at the very last second is inappropriate, especially when we're looking to cast a vote today. There's absolutely no reason we cannot or should not listen to the presentations that are being put in front of us as information. And I don't like the tone of the conversation as though we're pitting our employees, our department heads, our responsibilities as a county against our municipal partners that have their funding included within our relief funds. It's a tone that's been unfortunately there for 2 weeks now. I don't understand it, and I'd like to listen to these presentations today, but I'm in favor of tabling these, and so I'm making a motion to table item number 2.
Okay, let's see. And, okay, so a motion's been made to table the public health contact tracing and other essential functions proposal, that resolution by Mr. Hanson. Is there a second? Any second from the telephone? Anybody on the telephone? Seeing none, the motion to table dies for want of a second. Okay, if you would want to add any thoughts, Mr. Hanson, if not, we'll go to Ms. Allen.
I look forward to a productive meeting on Monday, and I hope these additional presentations are put in front of us immediately, if not sooner, so we can actually do our homework before we get to our meeting, our functional meeting on Monday.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Mr. Hanson. Ms. Allen, would you rise, please?
I just, I think there are a lot of balls in the air, and I was shaking my head because I think, as Mr. Hoshite said, we are unanimous about wanting to move forward and maybe moving forward in stages, like we release some of the 45% right away so the communities can get going on it. We release some public health money so we can get the contact tracing going. And the other things will continue to be balls in the air as we shake them out. That's why the CAC is meeting early and often. So I think our hearts are in the right place, and we're just trying to gather information. And some of the procedures maybe to have placeholder motions, and we can absorb them after what comes out of Monday's meeting. So we're all trying to get to the same place. Let's not be hard on each other.
Okay, Ms. Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with my colleague, Mr. Fraz. I also agree that we should hear from the departments, but at the CRF task force meeting of June 24th, we heard from 9 departments. Today, we should be using this time to gather details, as we just did from Director Jeffers. Give us the information. It's written, give it to us to consider over the weekend in preparation for Monday. But this time, today, right now, we should be hammering out the details for the 55-45 distribution of funds. So that, to your point, Mr. Chairman, when we come to the meeting as a full board on Tuesday, we have had time to get the CAC resolution to our colleagues, possibly by end of business today, if we use this time right now for that. And I'm sorry, Ms. Allen, I believe that there is some effort here to delay. Here we are in July, not a single dollar allocated or a decision made with respect to the allocation of money for the cities, the municipalities that make up this county. Absolutely, we have to consider our needs, health department being top priority. And of course, there are other needs within the Sheriff's Department, IT, administration, of course. But we need to get this money out, and this is a waste of time.
Okay, Mr. Shefflow.
Yeah, thank you.
A question, first of all, for Barb, and then I have a comment. Is Barb available?
Yes,
She
she
can hear me?
is.
Okay. I overheard on the radio a discussion that contact tracing might be eliminated or changed due to the high volume of positives. Now that might apply to Florida only, or, you know, I don't know, but my question is, have you heard, and what I assume is when you have too many cases that are not symptomatic, you know, if you got 1,000 cases a day, then you've got 10,000 contacts a day, and, you know, it may just be impossible at some point, or for some diseases. Have you heard anything about that?
First and foremost, Illinois is not going to stop contact tracing. I'm not sure what's going on in Florida. I can only concentrate on Illinois. And secondly, if you're asymptomatic, does not mean that you don't do what's called a viral shed. You do not have to be symptomatic to pass this virus on. That's the dangers of being asymptomatic. You're going through your daily life thinking everything's okay, and you're passing it around to every single person you come in contact with.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I just didn't know if that was in discussion anywhere, or just based on something I heard. The other comment that I have is the methodology. You know, some of this dispute today is what's on the table. Are we all comfortable with the 45-55 split? And then who's going to decide the allocation of the 55? Is that going to go through regular channels? Are we trying to decide that Tuesday? You know, the 45% going to cities, villages, and unincorporated, that's not going to be decided on Tuesday. That's just going to be a framework, 55-45. I'm assuming we're going to go there. But then, you know, how does it proceed beyond Tuesday? One last comment, just I think Drew's concerns. This is all being done on an expedited manner. So when time is short, the CAC committee, I mean, they were worried that this was going to drag on too long. They expedited it. They had a special meeting. They created a committee. Committee's meeting once a week. So these resolutions are just being expedited like the entire coronavirus relief measures. That's the way I see it. We could go back to regular order and start at the committee level and reconvene in August and see where we are, but I don't think people want to do that. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Sheffield. A couple of comments. Number one, the recommendations closer to a final decision, it's my understanding that those decisions closer to final decisions are going to be discussed on Monday at the CAC meeting, and that it's going to be decided for sure on the Tuesday meeting. I mean, I think that that's people's schedule, that CAC finalizes definitions and the percentages and some other details. So perhaps Mr. Hoscheit, isn't the intention of the Monday meeting to come to some conclusions to make recommendations on Tuesday?
Okay. For 60 days, this process wallowed around with no urgency. We formed a committee to have extra meetings like we need a hole in the head, but that's what was required to bring this to a head. Mr. Shefflow talks about urgency. Yeah, I'm glad we formed that CAC committee because now we've got the urgency in place to get things done. The information that's being presented today and appears to be headed to be presented under items 3 through 5 is information that's been available for several weeks. We should have seen it earlier. I agree. I mean, I'd ask that if there's going to be more, because I can walk and chew gum at the same time as we're going through this discussion, let's pass out the rest of the material so we can at least digest them as these resolutions are going to be considered. But the purpose of the committee or even if we had one person in charge of this whole process, there's work that has to be done before we can move forward. We agreed on an application process. We've got to get that done. We've got to have intergovernmental agreements. We've got to get that done. We have to talk about census numbers. We're going to get that done. To assume that the CAC committee has its own diabolical plan to come up with a resolution that's inconsistent with our discussion is just way off base. I think the substance of what the CAC committee and as chairman of the committee, what the substance of what the committee perceived would be appropriate to get done at this county board meeting would be simply to agree to the 55-45 structure and to provide for some mechanism or for of release of the 45% to the cities now, because assuming they comply with the application process. We already sent in that 45%, or $7 million is earmarked to unincorporated areas, which becomes the county board's responsibility to deal with. The committee suggested, and there was unanimous consent of all the members and board members that were participating, that would go to development committee. And I assume they'll pick up that task right away once this gets approved. With respect to the 55%, the county side, I had asked Mr. Onzik to present to us what the county reimbursable costs would be so we could see that at the committee, and also find out what the needs of our staff were. And here we are on the health department side seeing one of those lists, the $12 million or $13 million that's being requested. So this board ultimately decides where the 55 gets invested. And so I would assume that will be an ongoing discussion afterward. If there's an emergency, and I consider health an emergency, then we can consider pushing that to the forefront and getting that allocated maybe Tuesday, a chunk for contact tracing or whatever we need. But there's nothing hidden here that's going on. That's the logical process for this board to take is Tuesday to approve the 55-45 split, allow potentially 75% of the 45 to be dispersed while we finalize the rules and allocations there, and to take any request that the county has now that we deem to be a priority, we could let that go as well. We could approve that now, understanding that, until we have all the county requests, we really don't understand the whole population. But because I see the consensus is that we're all leaning toward health as the most important part of that, to allocate some for the health department's use is appropriate. The rest of the items should be subject to another committee meeting and discussed once we have the population of county requests in front of us. And that meeting can take place Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, whenever. If the urgency is here, let's get it done. But we've got to have the information and be able to ask questions about it. Barb, I'm looking at this, I've seen this breakdown once before, but there are some technical questions I have just to make sure I understand it. And I'm sure with the requests from the other departments, we're going to have the same questions. And that is not appropriate to vet at this committee today. We're not going to have the time to do it at the county board on Tuesday, but we just need to have a commitment to go forward. And again, I'm going to repeat myself. I think everyone wants the same goal. I think we're headed toward the same goal. This concept of we're favoring the cities and ignoring the county is a little bit, I think, inappropriate and misleading. And we all have to recognize that many of us live in cities. Okay, so as a resident of a municipality, my city is hurting financially, and we have money that they're entitled to get, and we need to get it to them. And so I'm not hurting my constituents by supporting a municipal fund because my constituents live in cities. And so we need to keep that to me, the county and the cities are on a level playing field here. And that's the way the state set it up. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hoshait.
Mr. Chairman.
Two observations. I'll come right to you, Mr. Martin. Two comments. First of all, on the 60 days, and this was kind of like, I forget what word, I think it might have been wallowing around, 60 days and like nothing happened. I'd just like to remind everyone that it's part of the national record that 7 days before the task force issued its recommendation to the board and passed it, the rules changed. The presumption of eligibility was taken out of the guidance. 1 day after it was, the recommendation was given by the task force, 1 day after, the Office of Management and Budget put some guidelines into place as far as what the application process looks like. So we don't need to denigrate the work done preliminary to get us to a starting point for the CAC group to take over. And it's legitimate that all authority rests in the county board following federal, state laws, and then our own ordinances. So one is that. Secondly, all some of us would like is that the county taxpayers who we work for, who pay our salary and benefits, are treated equally, not better or worse. This idea that, well, it's a straw man argument to say favoring cities and ignoring the county. Nobody has said that. We're saying treat people equally, have vehicles in place so that the same urgency can be given to public health, to the IT support, to the communication, to the county clerk, the same, not better or worse, the same as we give to our partners in the municipalities. Let's see, it was Mr. Martin was next.
To me, this is, we're losing in this conversation the basis for why this committee was established in the first place. The establishment of a board committee is not an aberration or a special event in the project. We don't buy a $75,000 truck for the highway department unless we've had a committee review and a recommendation to this board. We don't sit as a committee of the whole and say, what are my thoughts here? And then move to the next meeting. We assign the task to individuals. We do that with everything that we do. We assign that task to committees. The committees make reports. And then we, as members of the board, evaluate those reports. To me, it's out of order to sit today and say, well, we're going to think about this and then vote it on Monday. What this means is we're going to, the thought being that we're going to spend this money without the same consideration we would give to buying the $75,000 truck for the highway department. It's not moving with deliberate speed does not mean that we should forego the normal considerations that we give and normal reviews that we give to these processes. Otherwise, what this will mean to me as I look at this is that every month at the executive committee meeting, we're going to get a list of things that we get to think about over the weekend and then vote on Tuesday. Bypass the committee system and apparently deal with this on a piecemeal, unplanned basis.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Other discussion? Mr. Surgis, then Mr. Leonard. Mr. Surgis.
Just briefly, you know, I've listened to this for a couple of weeks now going on. My personal commitment is to the 55-45 split, and let's get them their 45% as fast as they can. What we decide to do with our 55%, we can listen to reports today, form resolutions, do placeholders. You know, if Barb's needs to be more expeditious than somebody else, I think that she's expressing that as strongly as she can right now. But I mean, if the committee is at the 55-45, let's get this moved on. If we need to listen to this today and we took time out of our days, let's go ahead and listen to it and let's move on.
Okay, let's see. Okay, Mr. Leonard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to make one comment. Number one, I believe in what John Hoscheit said, that the CAC committee is set up to do what's best for everyone, and I support that. I understand the desire to present different potential expenses, but the time is not now to make decisions on those, and we're not actually planning on doing that. But as a little compromise and maybe a little bit of good faith on everyone's part, I think the presentations should go on today, but I don't think we need to vote on those. All we need to do is hear, I think there are 2 more presentations. Is that correct, Mr. Chairman?
I believe there are 3.
All right, 3 more. Let those people, because they're here and they took time to prepare, hear those, but I don't think we need to vote on those to move those forward. And so, my suggestion is, let's hear the presentations. Everyone will get the information to review. Monday at the CAC committee, if they want to discuss that, they can. If they don't, that's fine too. At the board meeting on Tuesday, we can then vote on the most important thing that we're trying to do here. And that is define the allocation percentages for the county and then for the township and other municipalities, and get distribution out as quickly as possible. So that's my hope.
Okay. Well, and again, all of this is at the pleasure and the will of the county board within regulations and federal and state law. And so I believe that vehicles should be put in place so that action can be taken. If we want to split, there are going to be some things that have to be done quickly. I don't know if the members of the board noticed the expressions on my Dr. Jeffers' face during the conversation where we were talking about our municipal partners, and judging from my 8 years of working with Ms. Jeffers, it was a concern that I saw on her face that why are we not moving forward on what I need for contact tracing? And in order to get there, and you'll find that there are things that are necessary from sheriff's point of view, from IT's point of view, I'm sure that the circuit or the county clerk needs as much time. So we're trying to move things into position where we can act quickly. However, it is up to the executive committee to stage what's available to vote on Tuesday. So that's no problem. If you want information, that's always good. I would ask people to think about, when will be the next time after Tuesday that Barb Jeffers will get the contact tracing answer to her question? So I say that she has presented it before, and this is a second reading at executive committee like we always do, and then final decision comes from the board anyway at the final. So I believe that Ms. Thomas, I understand that you have said now that this is a waste of time, but I don't feel that way. But Ms. Thomas, I think that you'd like to be recognized to speak again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I agree with Mr. Martin that we need to take things through the proper committee flow. Having said that, I think there is an urgency and the priority does need to be with the health department. So I will be voting to move the second agenda item forward. But going a little further with what Mr. Leonard said, I don't object to hearing from the other departments, but I move that we send agenda items 3, 4, and 5 back to the appropriate committees and not present them to the full board on Tuesday.
Okay, so Ms. Thomas is moving to table the 3, 4, and 5. So that's the IT support items, the public safety item, and then the county clerk and then
send them to committee.
To the committee, which means that the normal time is that we would see that again after that committee work at executive committee meeting in August, and then we'd vote on it in later August. So the motion has been made. I need to ask for a second, if there's a second. And so I'm sorry, Mr. Leonard, I can't recognize that. Mr. Martin seconds tabling those. And now the clerk will call the roll.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman. So I understand this to be a motion to move this to a committee, not a motion to table. So what committee would it go to?
Can't hear you. I'm sorry.
Sorry. So what I heard was a motion to send, I think, items 2 through 3, 4, and 5 to a committee. This is not a motion to table. So my question is, and I think what the record needs to be clarified in, is what committee are you moving these resolutions to?
The proper committees for IT is administration, for public safety is public safety and judiciary, and county clerk is to public service. We can take it over.
Is the record? Thank you.
Excuse me. I would actually,
Would you like to clarify your motion, Ms. Thomas?
yes. I would like to, I move to send agenda items 3, 4, and 5 to the CAC committee.
I second that.
Okay, so the CAC committee. Now, with this being Friday, okay, and I understand you're saying that you want to, and that I believe is in the purview of the CAC committee. But I don't understand the distinction you're making, Joe, with the difference between tabling, which this effectively tables it, but I'm sure that you have some distinction in your mind. What's the distinction that you're making?
So the table, if it was a motion to table, it would stay here until it was taken off the table. A motion to send to a committee would move the resolution to either, as you summarized, individual committees, or as the motion is now made, all 3 resolutions would go to the CAC committee on Monday. So that's the motion that I understand being on the floor right now, that all 3 would go to the CAC committee on Monday for their consideration, and then they would debate and decide where it goes from their committee Monday. That's the distinction, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, and I understand. Hold on a second, though, because I think you have an extra complexity. So you've changed your motion. The second was for Mr. Martin. Mr. Martin, do you support that second? Okay, so then the second. Okay, hypothetically, let's say that it goes to CAC on Monday, and it's considered, is it voted on? Is your intention that it's voted on? And if it's voted on, how can it then be posted properly for public input under the Open Meetings Act for a Tuesday morning's meeting? Maybe there's an answer to that one, but Ms. Thomas and then Mr. McMahon.
Documentation is here in the room, and so why can't we share it today?
Oh, of course we can. It was going to be, but this has been sidelined, and I get it. So
I mean, really,
the question is, it goes to CAC on Monday. How do you get it in position that it can be voted on with proper notice, 48 hours notice on Tuesday?
because we have a placeholder for a CAC resolution on Tuesday's agenda. And so we may factor in some of the information, some of the some of the funding needs of the counties. I'm sorry, of the departments, perhaps,
Okay.
in the resolution.
Let me ask Mr. Hoscheit, as chairman of the CAC committee, is that something that's acceptable to, well, let's see. So CAC brings forward, we have a placeholder. Okay. There's a placeholder. So, and that's the value of having passed out both, is that you have total flexibility that you could insert something like that into the box car to move it down the track. So is that acceptable to the chairman of that committee?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I think, though, implicit in the motion that's on the table right now is the fact that If we're impressed today and over the weekend by the fact that some of the county requests are emergencies, we may recommend that those be advanced, but the other requests that are deemed not to be emergencies will be vetted through a committee process within the next few weeks to gather the appropriate information so we can make a rational decision.
Okay, that's
Knowing that 55% of the funds would be set aside for the population of county requests.
okay. I can see how that works. Ms. Allen first, and then Mr. Frost. Ms. Allen?
The only problem with that is that the reason for the CAC is to have a central agency that can measure the requests and move them forward to the county board for voting. If you send, I have no objection to sending something back to committee, but our committee structure is such that we meet monthly, whereas the CAC might be meeting weekly.
I'm
Isn't
sorry,
it-
Ms. Allen, I'm sorry. They did change it from Ms. Allen, excuse me, Ms. Thomas, and then the second by Mr. Martin. They did change it from sending it back to the committee to sending it to CAC.
Okay,
And so I think they're following your train of thought.
okay, all right.
Okay, good. Mr. oh, excuse me, it's Mr. Frost, and then Mr. McMahon, did you have anything procedurally further? Okay, thank you. Mr.
I just seem to recall that we had previous advice from the state's attorney's office that the CAC committee could move something directly from itself to the full county board.
Well, you can always call a special meeting. I'm just talking about Tuesday, July 14th.
Okay, it would have to be a special meeting thereafter then.
Good. Okay, Mr. Leonard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, a thought that I had is it looks like hopefully that the CAC committee on Monday will decide on a percentage to get out to the municipalities immediately, which I think is very important. I think what we could possibly also ask the CAC committee to consider is giving a certain percentage out to the King County departments, you know, depending upon sense of urgency. And if the CAC committee has enough time to review those requests, specifically the public health department and also the public safety area of the sheriffs, I think if they could give an allocation out or agree to vote on an allocation for some of the emergency needs, as Mr. Hoshite mentioned in the county, then not only could we take care of getting money to the municipalities, not all of it, but whatever percentage you decide on, but we can also do the same thing with the county. So I think that might serve everyone's purpose best. And if in fact there truly is an emergency, then the county can get their money as quickly as the municipalities in whatever departments are deemed emergency. Thank you.
Okay, that makes sense, and I think it's consistent with what the intention is. The intention is from Ms. Thomas's and Mr. Martin's motion, and then confirmation by the chairman of the CAC committee. Okay, is there any other? Let's see, we have a motion to move.
Just a bunch of junk.
Oh, okay, let's see.
Oh.
Who do we have on the phone? Oh, that was background information. Okay, background. Okay, voice. Okay, we have a motion and a second to move number 3, 4, and 5 to the CAC committee. Now, can I get clarification then? On
With
this?
documentation today.
With documentation, the discussion today, so that we have a preview. Is that right? Ms. Thomas? Can't read. Okay, good.
Documentation and discussion.
Documentation.
Right.
Presentation.
Documentation today, and then, which makes sense. That makes sense. It's fair enough. Okay. Mr. Hanson.
I'm lowering my hand. That's all I wanted to hear was that we'd still be able to receive the presentations and the documentation today.
Right. Fair enough. That accomplishes the objective, and the idea of the vehicle being in place, you can insert the amendments, taking care of our partners in the municipalities as well as the county partners. So good. I think that was. Any other discussion before we vote on the motion.
I have a question, Mr. Chairman. Shufflo here.
Yes, Mr. Shefflo.
So is the intention of the motion that these resolutions can't be discussed or acted upon at the county board meeting on Tuesday unless the CAC committee puts them into a motion that they're going to create Monday afternoon?
Yes. Yeah, the answer to that question, I believe, is yes. That basically we hear and learn today, and then the CAC committee has the flexibility to advance forward in the form of an amendment to a vehicle bill that's in position right now.
So my comment would be, why not move these both to the county board and to the CAC committee and
Okay,
keep that
that's not the
options
motion.
open?
Right, that's not the motion at hand. So
Okay.
any other discussion on the motion that we're considering? Seeing none, hearing none, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Allen? Sorry? Was that what was your answer? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, no.
No? Roz?
Yes.
Hanson?
Hanson, yes.
O'Shea?
Yes.
Iqbal?
Iqbal, no.
Kenyon? Yes. Leonard?
Yes.
Lewis?
Yes.
Martin?
Yes.
Sanchez?
Yes.
Shefflo?
Shefflo, no.
Surges?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Weber?
Weber, yes.
Winnicke?
Winnicke, yes.
Okay, motion passes.
Okay, the motion passes. And now we'll go ahead back to the portion of that, the intention, back to the listening and learning today with documentation. Roger, would you mind if Sheriff Hain goes ahead of yours? Okay.
Point of order.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, did we move item number 2? I think that's
Oh, I'm so sorry.
procedural vote. We need to move that to the agenda.
Right.
That's correct.
Okay. So, okay.
Still on the table, so.
So we have a motion and a second to move number 2 to the board agenda on non-consent. Okay, so that's been moved and second, and we've been discussing that. And so any further discussion? Let's see, Mr. Hoscheit, would you like to add any discussion to that at this point?
No, Mr. Chairman.
I have one question for Barb, please.
Could you rise, please?
Yep, I'm so sorry. Barb, on the, we had, as a board, we were trying to get some PPE on the shelves. That was bantered around a couple of times, even earlier this morning. In this proposal, you have 1.1 million in mitigation supplies. Is that the same thing? Help me understand that a little bit, just for the weekend, so I'm.
So the PPEs that's in my allocation is strictly for public entities such as our fire.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Oh, I forgot this one, sorry. My apologies. So, in my,
You answered that before. It's just for them not to sit on a shelf.
right.
Got it. Thank you. That's Thank you.
Okay, so any further discussion? Seeing none. Oh, okay. Any from the members of the executive committee on the phone? Hearing none, clerk will call the roll.
Sorry, what are we voting on?
We're voting on moving the resolution approving public health contact tracing and other essential function proposal to the county board agenda.
Yes.
2. Okay. Aye.
Roz?
Yes.
Hanson?
Hanson, yes.
O'Shea?
Yes.
Iqbal?
Iqbal, yes.
Kenyon? Yes. Leonard?
Yes.
Lewis,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Shefflo,
Shuffle, yes.
Surges,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
Weber,
Weber, yes.
and Winnicke.
Warnicki, yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, so the motion passes. Thank you, Mr. O'Shea. So Sheriff Hain, would you come forward and outline the information behind potential resolution approving COVID-19, related public safety communication and coordination proposal. And then Ms. Guthrie, thank you very much. Ms. Guthrie was away on vacation. She came back today so that she'd be available for this important matter. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Ron.
Board and Chairman, thank you for your time. I stand up here to speak on behalf of KaneCom and 16 other police and fire jurisdictions throughout Kane County that KaneCom serves. This is not solely a sheriff's office issue. So we do have a radio system that is not considered modern technology, but it is considered functional. When COVID hit in March, a switch flipped. And as we've talked about at our committees and at county boards, the sheriff's office rolled into a public health role here in Kane County. And when we point out certain tasks such as the Hesed House support and move, all our PPE distribution that we assist with the health department, our general calls for service, court paperwork service, and every municipality, incorporated and unincorporated in Kane County. Knowing that KaneCom has now entered almost 8,000 addresses of COVID-19 positive people in Kane, great thanks to the cooperation of the health department, we pass that information along to first responders as they go to these homes, whether it be a paper service, whether it be a domestic violence call, or one of our general calls for service. It is then passed back over the airwaves that the person in that residence is COVID positive through a certain code that was designed by Director Guthrie. However, that certain code has been made public, and it is now known what that code is, and our functional yet not modern technology radio system, telecommunication system, is unencrypted. So that means I can take my cell phone and I can go to a website, or I can simply download an app and monitor Kane County Sheriff's Office or Kane County Dispatch Communications live. What that switch flipped in March was our violation of federal HIPAA law. So we are now broadcasting people's private health information on our airwaves.
So, excuse me, Sheriff, so what you're saying, it's not so much the modern that we're looking for. What we had was, up until COVID, we had functional within the law, not modern, but COVID made our system no longer functional within the law. So COVID, it's not that it's modern, it's that it's no longer compliant with federal HIPAA laws. Is that right?
Exactly.
Okay, thanks.
And there is no way for us to encrypt this radio platform that we are currently on, so we can comply with that HIPAA law. You can go ahead, Roger. This is just an overview that I presented on before, just discussing a lot of the various duties that we have at the Sheriff's Office and the Office of Emergency Management. Please note that last one, which we have not talked about much before, if at all. We're forecasting for even more work towards the end of the year as a vaccine distribution becomes available, and we are tasked with pushing it out into the community, and mobile pop-up sites, and working hand in hand with the health department, and needing live telecommunications. And of course, at that time, very strong possibility, if not certainty, that we will be communicating people's personal information along with that vaccine distribution. Please go, Roger. Thank you. We'll see if this plays here live. So this is one of our deputies going to a call. I'm sorry, he's serving some court paperwork in Incorporated Aurora. And you'll notice a beep in here.
Yeah, I don't see the video, sir. I don't have it.
You don't have the audio? They should have played on the click.
Hang on just a second. Well, it's been converted to. Give me 1 second. So when we consider, you saw the notes on that slide, that our deputies and other police officers dispatched by KaneCom handle 10 to 12 incidents a day that are related to a COVID positive person. You get an idea of how often that information is conveyed across the airwaves in our new role here in public safety. And what you were going to hear if Roger's unable to pull that up, of course, we all like the videos and we like the audio because that gives that strong impact impression. But our deputy went to serve civil court paperwork, essentially. So went to serve civil court paperwork. And if we do get it to play here, there'll be a long beep. And that's when the person's name was communicated over the airways between KaneCom and our deputy. And it was said the person is COVID positive after his name was transmitted on the air. Again, an example of something that happens 10 to 12 times a day right now. You are on the 4th slide. Next one. There we go. Give it one more click. We can go ahead and roll forward. You get the gist of the issue that repeats itself ever since March. Thank you. There's our data on 10 to 12 calls per day. And again, that COVID code sign is publicly disclosed, so not necessarily a secret anymore. That's not going ahead, Mark. I'm not flipping ahead. So you can go to the next. You took away my thunder by putting the red line through the Kenwood part. So Ms. Guthrie and I worked together for the better part of the last 3 months, investigating, researching what option would be best for us to go to and how fast we can get there for an encrypted radio system. The first one, that $14 million option, could not even be implemented in 2020. Question mark if it could even be implemented in 21. So it was natural for us to focus on the Motorola Starcom system.
which is also used by almost every other municipality in Kane County currently. The $5 million cost would be our 2020 cost, and that can be implemented well within this year. We're going to go ahead, Roger. So the benefits of this system, again, the focus is encryption. The public will not be able to listen to our activity as we perform in these public health roles. It enables that compatibility, interoperability with other police and fire agencies. Of course, we have 16 other police and fire agencies just under the KaneCom umbrella that will be able to use this. We've included the health department in this conversation. It will allow us to have them have immediate communications with these portable radios as well, allow us interoperability with their operations, which we desperately need in this new world. And I keep noting, this does support municipalities as 17 other agencies under the KaneCom umbrella. We can go ahead. So a quick cost breakdown. What does that $5 million look like? It's about $4 million in capital assets. And I say approximately because we are working with unsolid numbers. So Motorola is walking literally through our sites to determine exactly what we would need in capital assets to move forward. We're looking at about, you're probably asking, what are these capital assets? It's about 500 radios for our operators, including Health Department, Office of Emergency Management, and radio consoles for KaneCom, all to the tune, again, of about $4 million. It'll be just under another $1 million. It'll be just under another $1 million for our first year of user fees and personnel costs, as KaneCom will have to hire 3 additional personnel, having this upgraded radio platform. Costs moving forward, so this would be a 7-year term that we'd be entering into with Motorola. So annual user fees, $296, you see the numbers up there, $196,000 in personnel cost. Just like we do now with KaneCom operations, we spread that across the spectrum of the 17 KaneCom users. And it gives you just an estimate of what the average annual cost would be, about $28,962 per agency. But again, it's a sliding scale based on the percentage of activity by the agency. And we can roll ahead. Just a quick note on other people who have either worked on this project with us, but all of these people are unanimously behind the acquisition of the Starcom radio system. So I do want to thank everyone that has chipped in, given their input, advice, and direction in this process. Michelle, do you have anything to add?
I do not. Thank you for hearing us today and for the support. And I think Sheriff Hayne covered everything great, and happy to answer any questions you might have about our previous process, what COVID has done, and that's all.
Okay. Thank you very much. Sheriff, your ability to concentrate with distractions going on, admirable. Again, Ms. Guthrie, thank you for being here. Now discussion from the board. Any questions that might be asked? Mr. Leonard, then I think Mr. Sanchez, and then Mr. Surges. Mr. Leonard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I'd like to thank Sheriff Hayne and Ms. Guthrie, especially you, Ms. Guthrie, for cutting your vacation short to come here. This is truly an expenditure that we need to take care of now, not only from a public safety standpoint, but also from a liability standpoint. All of these people now that are being exposed through a non-encrypted program, it's public knowledge. And, we have liability exposure there too. So I think it's very important that this be considered. And when Ms. Thomas came up with her motion, they have this go through the CAC committee. I think it was great because this is an expense right here that I think is an emergency and needs to be done. Now, I do want to qualify my statement. I am extremely prejudiced towards these departments as they are under the Judicial and Public Safety Committee. But I believe it in my heart that this is the right way for us to spend some of our money in the county in order to not only ensure the public safety and reduce any potential liability exposure, but also to help all the surrounding communities that KaneCom services, as does the sheriff. So thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Leonard. Mr. Sanchez?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you know, I don't mind being a rubber stamp for whatever you ask for. Definitely goes without saying. When it comes to the CARES Act money, though, I do agree, measure twice, cut once. We have to be very, very careful. And I would hate to give you $5 million to find out we actually have to pay for it because it's not technically eligible. We received a memo from the state's attorney's office, I believe 2 days ago, that suggested that, well, the first item is not eligible because of the timeline, but the second one isn't eligible because there have been some waivers of certain aspects of the HIPAA laws that then could be interpreted if we were to spend the money for this expenditure because of those changes to the HIPAA laws, we really didn't need to do that, and that it could then be considered a non-eligible expenditure. So I don't know, have you spoken with the state's attorney's office on this issue? Is there any resolution on the matter?
So are you referring to the Department of Health and Human Services memo that they included on the HIPAA law during a nationwide public health emergency? Is that the document, right?
Yes.
Sure. Okay, thank you. So I did notice as I read the document, not just the highlighted areas, that when the secretary issues such a waiver, it only, underlined, only applies to, in number 2, to hospitals that have instituted a disaster protocol. So it clearly does not apply to us because we're not a hospital. And then at the end of that document, it does say efforts to protect the identity of individuals and prevent stigmatization of patients is also a priority. If information regarding an individual's COVID-19 status needs to be released, such as you hear on our radio traffic, such disclosure should be minimized to only necessary individuals. So unfortunately, the entire public gets to hear it, whoever wants to monitor our radio. Persons with a need to know this information should be provided with guidance on how to prevent further disclosure of the information. So I did read through the state's attorney's letter when it was forwarded to me, and Joe and I did have a conversation after I read it yesterday, and of course I'm not going to speak for him. I'll open the floor up to him if you all would like after I speak. I was not interviewed during their review process, being on the operations side of this system for 3 months, in a review process. I know it was noted in the letter that it lacks a factual basis to acquire the system. And I think that we presented that factual basis here today and the quantity of calls that we take related to COVID and actual audio. So we'll let you render your own opinion. Yeah.
I just want to add to that as well. We've talked at Public Safety Judicial and other meetings about how KCAM telecommunicators are screening every caller and asking if they have flu-like symptoms, obviously not in progress calls. Sometimes who the officers and fire responders are seeing when they get to the scene is not the caller. And that's when we have exchange of back and forth where they're asking, is this person on a list? And that's how some information is getting through more on the radio, is that the person that we screened isn't necessarily the person that they are talking to when they get on the scene. Because we do have policies and procedures, and Code 100 was developed at the beginning of this, before we knew the volume that we were going to encounter, 8,000 different addresses. Sometimes it's not just a positive patient that we're talking about, it's someone who's possibly positive. So possibly, that's a lot more correspondence about that back and forth on the radio. And I also just want to point out that this is not affecting some of the other communication centers in the county because they are on an encrypted radio system. So we are coming with this challenge because we are not encrypted, and we are unique in that in King County.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. Mr. Surgis, would you rise, please?
First off, wow. And I remember when COVID hit, some of my municipalities reached out to me immediately, and I reached out to Barb and said, their concern is when one of their fire trucks or ambulance pulls up, are they made aware that this is COVID? Barbara, that was way back February, March. And she acknowledged the database is there. It's right on the initial phone call. It's right there. And I remember going home to my wife and saying, you don't even know what we're walking into. And then you got to worry if a guy sneezes on you. And I can't imagine what your people go through. With all that said, you needed an encrypted radio. With Jared, I'm saying, let's go get him. But the business side of me says, who's the referee here? who within our organization, and I'm thinking it's the auditor, that winds up saying, are we in compliance, and has to defend us when the audit comes from Mount High, whoever that is, saying, okay, you've spent this money, now we're gonna go through and oops, this one doesn't qualify, but these do and this doesn't. So my question is, how do we dot the i's and cross the t's, and who's the referee on this that we ultimately have to do? And that was one of my questions as well, to just figure that out so we can kind of say, as we're evaluating the asks, what are we evaluating them against?
Okay, Mr. Leonard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Surges, I really agree with your point there. However, I think one thing that we have to realize, whether or not somewhere down the road an auditor would come in and decide it is or is not eligible, we still need to do this.
Agreed.
And we need to do it now.
Agreed.
So, we have an exposure that we have to take care of. Hopefully, it's going to be covered under the COVID CARES Act. I feel confident that it will, and speaking to Sheriff Hain and Ms. Guthrie about it, but there's no 100% guarantee. So, once again, I understand your point. I agree with it. I'm just saying, I think at this point, this is an emergency, whether it qualifies under the CARES or not. We've got to do something. We have to do it now.
And Mr. Leonard, my question is omnibus for Monday on all of these expenditures. Who's the quarterback on this? And I don't have the answer to that.
Mr. Hoshai?
Just a couple points. I appreciate the presentation, obviously very thorough and good information. As Chairman of Finance, Mr. Leonard, if this came up as an emergency request and we had to come up with $5 million in our current budget, I think we'd take a different approach in evaluating it, maybe to see if alternatives were available. But having said that, if the COVID funds are available and it's a permissible expenditure, it makes sense. One thing to consider here, and this is getting into the weeds, but this is the type of thing that the committees will need to ferret out, is that if things go the way I anticipate, we'll have 55% of the funds available for county expenditures. We're also going to have another $7 million for the unincorporated areas. And to the extent that this service with CaneCom, in terms of its geography and benefit, flows into the unincorporated areas, maybe a portion of the funds could come from that fund as well. So just a thought in terms of preserving or maximizing the use of our countywide funds. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hoshai. I believe to answer, to make some progress against the question that you're asking, I know it's omnibus and it is omnibus. But on this specific item, all the time, it's going to be whoever the county auditor is going to need to go through that. So Terry Hunt, it is important. I just checked the screen again. Mr. Hunt's name is on the list of support. I hope after the state's attorney's office has a chance to interview the sheriff and goes over the factual information, however that was put, that then sustains and perhaps overcomes the initial objection. And then when this first came up, the question was, is there some way, after having handled IRS audits and gone, aged prematurely on those, they're arbitrary, they're lousy. I don't like envy the auditor for needing to go through not only OMB, but also the Treasury Department audit. But you say, who trumps an auditor? Who in the end can you present evidence from? An answer is typically a judge. Now, if we could go for a letter of advice, which they will not give us, but if we could go to a court system and have a court say, man, it's just on the face of it this way. But, and Clint Hull, Chief Judge, wants to help in every way he can legally, but he says, Chris, we just can't do that. We don't interfere because we need to be unbiased at the point that a case comes before us. So if it's possible that the state's attorney And somebody, and I don't know how this would work, because not my background, but if a friendly court case could be brought forward and then give the court system something to chew on and to issue an opinion quickly, I would think that that is something very good to have in the file for when the auditor comes. So just a thought. Maybe that's crazy, but just a thought. Okay, other questions or thoughts? Ms. Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the presentation. I agree that this update is overdue and is a priority, but I just want to repeat that we can't consider, these requests in isolation. We have to see the whole picture of need. Just looking at the CRF presentation from, the 24th, where it talks about how much money can be used for direct payroll costs. Sorry, I just lost it trying to show it. But there's a graph that shows $36 million of payroll costs that the county could potentially use the COVID funds to cover. And most of that is in the sheriff's office. Well, we're probably not going to be able to fund every need. And so we're going to have to prioritize, which means we have to see the whole picture. So again, I think that's why it's important that we get information. Yes, this one. Thank you so much. This chart from the June 24th CRF task force meeting. Payroll alone, $36 million. And so we have to see the whole picture before we can, so we can prioritize. I mean, if we basically say, okay, Sheriff's Department, you get, we think these are top priorities, which totals, I don't know, $10 million, but it's up to you to determine, at the end of the day, what the priorities are. Communication system versus complete payroll. We've got to factor all the needs of the county together. Thank you.
Okay. Other thoughts? Oh,
So that-
excuse me.
Can I speak to that?
Sheriff? Yes.
So I was not consulted during that number either. So that was done externally from my office, and I think it's a very aggressive number.
Okay.
But I was just asked by email to provide more specific data in reference to that. So I understand exactly what you're saying. So we're on the same page.
Well, thank you. I mean, it's good to know that,
Thanks, Sheriff.
Thank you.
And the idea, I think, again, it was a Greek philosopher who said, the proper consideration of a thing is seen in its relationship to the whole of which it is a part. And so the idea of everything needs to be considered together, certainly true. I mean, it's obviously true. So other comments or questions in this part of the presentation? Mr. Hoshai.
Is there a handout on this, or can you send this to us? Your presentation?
I certainly can.
Thank you.
As long as that is not a violation of Open Meetings Act, am I able to email that electronic file?
You know what? Second thought, I'll hold off. I'll get it privately. All right, thanks.
Well, here, let's get an answer to that question. Can it be sent? Why would it not be able to be sent out?
So now that it's been presented here, it's a public document, but my advice is that you remove any reference to specific addresses. I know you deleted names. I think you beeped that section out, but there still was a specific address, I think once or twice. So just eliminate that. But this is already a public document. So yes, it can be emailed.
I'd ask also that we delete the sections that talk about violations of law.
Absolutely.
So Gabby, I'm going to ask you after those adjustments are made by the sheriff, then to send it out. And Sheriff, would those adjustments be able to be made today? And then when? Okay, so that'll be done, and then we'll pass it out by later on. Thank you. Thank you, Sheriff. Thank you, Ms. Guthrie. Okay, next up, Roger Fonstock on information discussion with any documentation eventually on resolution approving COVID-19 related public health, public safety, and court system, inclusive, equitable IT infrastructure. So, Roger.
All right, I'm going to speak from here instead of the podium, but so some of the things that they just mentioned about public safety and the radio is incorporated into the numbers that you see here. Just like anything else, the IT department, we do not purchase infrastructure equipment for IT's exclusive use. It's for the court system, it's for the public safety, it's for the sheriff, the health department, all inclusive. Going back to the sheriff and Director Guthrie's comments about the radio system, one of the things that is a direction that was recommended by FEMA and the National Incident Management System is that dispatchers and public safety use plain language on radio to stop miscommunicating treatment or other aid to people that are in need of medical assistance or otherwise. So plain language is becoming the standard. We can't use plain language on the radio because of our lack of encryption. So therefore we have to use what are called 10 codes. Those were created, decades ago, and you call out numbers to say what's going on. Those numbers get misinterpreted in an analog frequency channel, and you make mistakes and you say things that happen that you can't take back. Somebody's listening to the radio. So that's one of the guidances from FEMA and NIMS is to do plain language. And I just thought I'd add that to the conversation. In particular, when they were doing the transfer of people for Hesed House, imagine moving all of those people and not being able to talk in plain language. You have to use cryptic codes the whole time you're doing it. That's the kind of problem that they face. So to be brief, we divided our infrastructure needs into some different priorities, and we'll be very brief. So the fiber optic network diversity and disaster preparedness, in the process of supporting the different court operations, remote access, all the digital things that people are asking us to do, including the web conference, there's existing expenses that have already been incurred. I think we're somewhere around $300,000. I've heard some people, questioning whether or not we had calculated all the already obligated monies. So we're working with finance to collect all that information as much as we can. All of those requests would have been submitted to Sheriff Hain and Barb Jeffers in order for them to give us the go-ahead to buy the equipment to get those services moving. So the first part, fiber optic network diversity and disaster preparedness, is how all of those different devices connect and talk. It's the infrastructure that allows them to communicate, and some of the things that are responsive to COVID, or they're responsive to these types of health issues. They're using devices in the field, they're using devices in their offices. All of those are running on this infrastructure. And what this is about is getting some diversity in the infrastructure and systems that they're going to be using this next 6 months. Right now, there are many of those buildings where we have a single connection into the building, and if we're having service interruptions, even audio, it wasn't a network interruption, but infrastructure interruptions can be devastating to an operation. If we have one connection into the judicial center, we're out there with flags marking it to make sure we don't disrupt the court system while we build the multi-use building. So we're out there flagging the fiber lines to make sure nobody's cutting them. It's because we have one connection. So if you lose something that significant to you, you're going to interrupt court for maybe days while you try to rebuild it. I think we're under a day if we cut it now. But those, I have some more detail information, but we can go through those at a later date. Systems and servers preparedness, NDR, same thing applies. For the infrastructure that we support them with, we have enough diversity to run a lot of the systems and have duplicative efforts to keep them up and running when we have problems. But in order to keep pace with the additional types of services that they're asking for, we need more storage, we need more processing power. That's that second line item that's in there. The third line item, which is public safety radio telecommunications, that's, I believe, duplicate of the sheriff's request. And then as you get into the last one, there's this request to do underserved communities or to reach out to them. So we were asked to put together what areas would you want to reach out from our existing fiber network to, and how much would that look like? So we put together fiber runs that go along county right-of-ways that go out to the rural communities west of Randall Road and Orchard. So those are the communities like Sugar Grove, Elburn. They go out to Burlington and Virgil, Maple Park, the smaller communities, to pick up their main government buildings, school buildings types of structures, or fire and police. Those include about, I think it was about 53, 60 miles of distance to go west of Randall Road. So I think many of these, other than public safety radio, kind of the top three are what we would prioritize. Obviously, the underserved areas, there's need out there still, but that's something that I think the board needs to consider. And we do have details that we can provide, and we'd be happy to send those out. So that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Okay, questions? Mr. Frost?
Yeah, of course. I'm going to ask, talking about the fiber optic network, and as I represent one of the western districts, I'd love to see that happen. So my question is, timeline, we have to expend this money by December. So how do we design, build, let bids, and get that done? And then what's the COVID connection that we use to justify the cost?
So the original construction estimates were preliminary. They're based on mileage. And one of the advantages we have of being in a county right-of-way is that we have all of the diagrams to lay the fiber into the right-of-way. So engineering for fiber construction like this, under our existing engineering services, which would be NTI and Adesta G4S, we would have them build plans for each route. Those could be done in a matter of a couple weeks just because of all the existing drawings that we have. And then they were telling us that they thought they could mobilize and build the laterals that we were talking about, especially in unincorporated Kane, where you don't have a lot of congestion or issues with getting through city structures. You're going through a rural right-of-way. So they were pretty confident that they could do that within the next 6 months. Probably the biggest challenge is crossing state highways and railroad. So that's their major concern.
And what about the COVID?
Sure. So the legislation and the act that they have specifically identifies funds that are there to improve broadband and remote access for public safety, for government, for agencies and schools even to respond to remote learning, remote communication, remote office work. All of those types of things are basically available through network services. So you can't necessarily build to every house and every structure out in the western side of the county, but if you can get the main structures that provide the kind of the beacon of information on at least that part of it is ready to go. And then if the end users can get online, they can get to it. But we have a lot of communities where they struggle to get their information out or online and even communicate with other government agencies. So that's kind of the target of it.
And Ms. Jeffers, further thought for answering Mr. Froz's question?
Yes. I want to share with you how when we started COVID, when it first started, I was required to issue isolation orders within 24 hours. And that required you'd be in the hospital, you'd be ready to discharge 11 o'clock at night. They'd call my staff. They came to my house. I had to sign the orders, we called the state's attorney. My staff then had to go back to the office, and I can't tell you how many nights I held the phone to make sure they got in safely, because it's in Aurora. They would go in, log in, get the necessary document, drive to the person's house. We had 24 hours to notify you of isolation. get your signature so you understood now you're quarantined. That gave us the ability to leverage legal aid. We were struggling with the technology, and I remember after 2 weeks, this was getting to be exhausting. We were working 7 days a week, and Roger's ability to ramp us up was able to get us, I don't know what it's called because I'm not the technology, but where we could digitally access forms without going into that building and getting the information we need and doing it all electronically safely so we didn't violate HIPAA laws, because that was the whole purpose of that triage. And the state hadn't figured it out and we hadn't figured it out. So it was a lot of work around the technology. And let's not forget when we all had to shelter in place, what that took. Everybody going home. Now, the majority of my staff still came to the office, but all the rest of these people had to be ramped up with, I can't tell you how many times I've called Roger in the middle of the night. My laptop's frozen. I can't get in. And because of the isolation and quarantine orders we were required, we had a time limit, and not once did he complain. So I think, not knowing what all that is, but without good technology, it really puts our community at a disadvantage. And it's all COVID related.
Okay, and we'll go to Mr. Sanchez next, but further clarification because it's an important question from Mr. Fraz. Again, equal access to proper speed internet. Equal access is important. The minority population incidences of COVID disease, as you've read in the newspapers, is higher than the general population. I believe that the #1 highest impacted group, Hispanic, and then African American. The idea that what I've read in the arguments being made is that when people must work, they must be exposed to COVID, and they don't have the capability of access. The distance learning, there was an article in the Suburban Chronicle that said state calls for return to classrooms, but could revert to remote learning. So it's not only employees, but also students, and then the idea of the telemedicine. To give you an idea of how disparate the units of speed are in some areas, out in Western Kane County, there's an area specifically that had, say, 16 units of speed, just 16 units. Then they took it up to 38 units of speed, whether that's whatever they are. A company came in and established 1,000 units of speed. I think that's a gigabit. And that then fostered competition for a competitor to come in. Now they came in at 350, but the idea of once somebody breaks the ice, more people come to compete and then deliver those services. So I believe that Mr. Sanchez was next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Fonstock, the first 3 items up there, does that address the concerns Director Jeffers mentioned?
I think that the first 3 I would describe as serving, the county as far as our abilities and capabilities. The 4th one is kind of directly addressing the underserved areas like communities that need the different telecommunications enhancements to be able to communicate effectively, whether it's for schools or they have public safety response. And they mention that in the guidelines. If you want to read through the U.S. Treasury guidelines, they specifically mention that you can use the CARES Act funding for improving technology to allow people access to better education, health, public safety opportunities. All of those things are mentioned in there in different aspects of them. So it's kind of, you can, I guess, depending on who your audience is, one of those applies.
I guess a further clarification question, it sounds like the fiber optic underserved areas that would be provided to school districts, municipalities. If we have a neighborhood, of lower income residents and they don't have good internet, are they going to be signing up for Kane County internet? It's going to go straight to their house? Or how would it benefit those residents directly?
So looking at like what they would call fiber to the home or fiber to the premise or fiber to the business, we provide what I would call structured like backhaul or core fiber. And then we look for resellers or partners to help get it to homes. So we have a physical infrastructure that people tap into to deliver things over long distances. So think of it as interstates and highways versus your municipal neighborhood roads. So if you go out west, they don't have the fiber network in their town. So the option to hook up to it, even an entrepreneur that wanted to connect to homes doesn't have a way to get it there unless they pay all the infrastructure costs to get it there. So it just like bringing a highway through a small area, you're bringing fiber through. We would want to target those, what I call major institutions or large institutions, and bring the fiber into there for a distribution point. And then you'd look for partners that would want to either do wireless to the home, or they'd want to do fiber, or you could even still use the cable television infrastructure to deliver it house to house. Most people will tell you that delivery to the home, just like any other service, is based on the market. So if there's market demand, people build it. If there's, if it's an underserved community and you want to try and help get service there, that infrastructure has to be there first, and then you start working with people to get it into the different neighborhoods and homes. There's been a lot of models for fiber to the home. There's been models for wireless to the home. We know a lot of the partners that do that. Most of them will stop short of doing it because there's no infrastructure to support it. So they just stop. They're like, I can't get 8 miles out into the country to even start a service. And many of your cable TV franchises out west, that's why there's such a limit to the service providers, is because it's just few and far between. It's a long distance out there.
Okay, any other thoughts or comments, questions? Seeing none. Any from any of the participants on the phone? Okay, hearing none. Thank you very much, Mr. Fonstock. Next up, I'd like to welcome back Brian Pollock, who served on this board for, I think it was 4 years, to represent the county clerk's office. And if, okay, good. You're going to, good. That way we can hear you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Okay, I was going to go through it quickly because we're on time. And most of you have heard this before. We have a PowerPoint now and flushed out a few of the points. So good start. Thank you, Roger. Quickly talking about a few of the things that go into running an election and how it's been affected by COVID. Recruiting and training our judges, preparing our voting equipment, finding polling places, voter registration, as you see down the list. It's not just we flip a switch one day and we have an election. Months of planning go into this, and these things have been affected pretty much all year. Move ahead, Roger. Thank you. To the polling place costs. We talk about frontline employees. Our election judges and our staff are frontline employees. They're the ones that are there when the public comes in to vote. So we need to protect them like we're protecting other frontline employees. We're required by law to have a certain amount of judges. We have to plan for 1,500 election judges. So all of these things we're talking about, actually 1,500 plus we have early voting, because just to make sure, you may be hearing about pushing vote by mail, but we still have election day. We still have early voting and we still have election day voting. So we have to prepare for all of these things. Nothing was wiped away. We still have to run the same election we plan to run now in terms of COVID and with additional vote by mail. So those numbers are there. So we need all the things that we've talked about: face shields, masks, gowns, gloves for all of those judges. We also need sanitizing wipes to wipe down, pens when they voters sign the affidavits, voting equipment, booths, et cetera. We need sanitizing machines. For those of you that voted on election day back in March, we had those sanitizing dispensers as people walked in. Now we have them for election day. We've rented before, now we've purchased. We need the sanitizer as well. We need the judges to have it at their tables. We need the separators at the check-in tables. We need separators between the booths to maintain the distance. We have to talk about sanitizing these locations, the polling places, after election day. Those schools, those community centers, those village halls, they're used the next day. So we're looking for solutions to sanitize them rather than farming it out to a third party to clean up afterwards. The scanning thermometers at all the polling locations so that we can take temperatures for when people come in. Having a location for people who have a high temperature so that we don't expose all the voters and the judges to that. People who have had exposure to COVID. We need a separate location for those voters to go, because even though they've had opportunities to vote early or to vote by mail, they may present with symptoms that day. So we have to be clear. We're estimating about $250,000 for that. As I've mentioned, this is an estimate. This is our best guess. This is based on what we've seen other jurisdictions do, what we've planned to do, but things change. We may be in the middle of a second wave in November. We also have to follow what guidelines, not just what Director Jeffers offers to us, but what the state says. The law that was passed mandates that all election authorities follow any guidelines that the state Department of Public Health may throw upon us at some point in the future. Okay. In terms of vote by mail, if you're a registered voter, and I presume everyone here is, you've received a letter in the mail from our office asking about, informing you about the opportunity to vote by mail and having an application. So that's already been sent. That was about $111,000 to get that out to 211,000 registered voters. In terms of the vote by mails themselves, we're planning for somewhere between 75 to 100,000 of those voters to vote by mail. We sent out 211,000. We have over 300,000 registered voters. If you look at what's happened in primaries so far this year of states that have come in the COVID era, you're looking at triple, 4 times, maybe more the number of registered voters. I'm sorry, the number of vote by mail ballots at their highest. Our peak is we processed 20,000 in the general election in 2018. If we're looking at 4 times that, we're looking at 75 to 100,000. I'll mention in the future, but if we're looking at about $1.50 for the postage costs, that's 150,000. We run through the steps of what it takes to process a vote by mail ballot, putting everything together. If you've received one, you have that inner envelope, you have the ballot that has to be specifically printed to your address, you have the instructions, you have the affidavits, everything goes in there, it takes time. When the ballot comes back in, that envelope comes, there's a signature on it, that has to be scanned. The signature of the voter has to be compared to the signature that we have on file for that voter to make sure that that person signed it and that ballot is valid. There's a long process that's done in a bipartisan way by election judges. The envelope has to be sliced open, the ballot has to be extracted, the ballot has to be scanned and tabulated. Again, all these things take time. So if you put everything together, it takes about 15 to 20 minutes or so on the outbound, on the inbound, on the whole process of a ballot and its lifespan of going out, coming back, obviously not the mail time. So with looking at 100,000 ballots, we could be looking at $300,000 to $400,000 in staff costs for that. But there's a better option in terms of automation, as the slide shows. We did purchase a folding machine. The folding machine, because our ballots, if you know, they're big if you've received one, because we have to have in English and Spanish, and we want to make sure that people can actually see it. So our ballots are 11 by 17. They, in the past, were sent out in a large envelope. With this folding machine, they're double folded, and we've cut our postage costs in half. So that could be $75,000 savings and we spent $15,000 on a folding machine, excuse me. The inserter assembles all of the pieces of the ballot, from the ballot, the affidavits, the instructions, the envelopes, puts it together. Instead of doing a few an hour, it does hundreds in a minute. Significant savings in terms of staff time. The cost of the inserter is $500,000. The sorter, when those ballots come in, it runs through the system. It scans a signature so that when the election judges are going to compare the signature that's on the ballot to the signature that's in the file, it'll come up on a screen so the judges can look at it rather than looking at the envelope, then looking at and going back and forth. So again, it automates the process. You still have the bipartisan group of judges to do it. It just makes it a lot easier and faster. Like I said, it captures the signatures. It processes hundreds a minute rather than several an hour. It sorts the envelopes into whatever categories we want. And there's ballot tracking. And that's one thing with this. When the ballots go out, we will know, and the residents and the voters will know when their ballot left the clerk's office, when it got to the post office, when it got to the voter's home, when it was sent back to the post office, and when it came back. So less confusion about, well, where's my ballot? Well, we know where your ballot is because of the barcode and the tracking. I know I'm running through this quickly, but there'll be plenty of time to discuss it. Next slide, ballot drop boxes. So the statute that was passed and signed into law by the governor a few weeks ago calls for ballot drop boxes so that for people that aren't mailing them back, there would be secure locations where the ballots could be dropped off, similar to the tax box that the treasurer's office has, bolted to the ground, secured by camera, et cetera. There were additional mandates for early voting hours. We have good coverage for our early voting, but there are certain additional hours that are now mandated by state, additional cost to that. And then the non-election costs are the PPE and the separators and those adaptations for our office, as well as lost staff time and COVID-related staff time. So that's briefly what I have. I know it'll probably run through this again in other committees, so hopefully that gives you an outline of where we're at.
Okay, questions for Mr. Pollack or any comments, discussion from the board? Ms. Allen, and then Mr. Sanchez.
Can you get this into our system?
It was sent out this morning.
Oh,
so
I'm sorry.
all board members should have it.
Thanks.
Okay, and by the way, what's the total cost of all the requests?
Somewhere between 1.7 and 2 million. We have some things that are still out there in terms of.
Mr. Sanchez?
That was my question, the approximate total. I started to tabulate it myself and I was over $1 million.
Okay, Mr. Fraz?
Thank you. Clear, concise,
Interesting.
nice list, and an affordable number. Thank you.
Asked, but
Okay. All right. Other comments or questions? Seeing none in the room, anybody from the participating on the phone? Hearing none, thank you very much, Mr. Pollack. And then finally, a presentation that will come on Monday. The CAC group asked for breakdown across departments in the county, and Joe Onsick is going to be available to present those to that group. Okay. Is there anything, committee reports? Mr. Surgis?
In this upcoming week's Human Resources, Human Services, we've been working, multiple departments have been working on the human benefits, the benefits package that we're trying to get rolled out. An extremely aggressive project, an extremely burdensome project in as much as it's not housed in human resources. It's IT, human resources, payroll, 2 to 3 or 4 outside consulting firms. We are desperately trying to, that's the wrong word. That sounds ridiculous. we are trying to make sure, through Bill, help me if there's a better word, aggressively trying to reach a deadline to have this all online by open enrollment. And I think that we have juggled and maneuvered and tried to bring things together. And we have a large meeting. We're planning on about 45 minutes to an hour during this committee meeting to bring us up to speed. And we're going to utilize Roger's Zoom technology instead of flying people in to give reports, to try and do this and streamline this and make this happen. But I think this is one of those catalyst events in who we are to our staff and our employees and what we may look like in the future. And this meeting is really going to help us determine where we are. And then secondly, Drew, a week or two ago, maybe a month back, I had brought to Tom Rickards' attention some concern that our bridge on Route 72 in downtown Dundee, and I don't know what powers that be or whose conversation, or if this is just fluke of nature, but the Route 31 portion of the Long Meadow project seemingly has advanced itself while the bridge project seemingly retarded itself. And I know that doesn't seem like any big deal to you folks, but in little river towns with no way to get over a bridge, this is huge. And I think whoever, and if it's just fluke, oh well, thank you anyway. So.
Well, I'm a politician, so I'll take credit for
There
it.
you go.
Okay. Mr. Frost.
I just wanted to let everybody know that the multi-use building, the project could not be going better. Weather's been cooperative. And I couldn't be happier with RC Wegman, our general contractor that we chose, and Campton Construction, who did the site work. The site preparation is essentially in the final stages. Underground utilities are in. The foundation was completed this week. And one of our big benchmarks, Monday morning, the precast wall panels will arrive, as well as the crew to erect them. So they put about 12 panels up a day. So between Monday and Friday or the following Monday, you'll see the shell of a building completed out there. So couldn't be going better.
Thank you, Mr. Frost. Any other committee reports? Any committee report? I want to make sure that we ask the CAC committee. Any report for today?
No formal report. I think we covered everything. Look forward to Monday's meeting.
Okay. Okay. Anything else for the good of the order? Seeing none, hearing none. May I have a motion and a second to adjourn? So moved by Mr. Kenyon, second by Mr. Sanchez. Permission to have a voice vote on that one? All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Thank you.
Thank you.